We had already mentioned in the morning plenary and also in the opening plenary that effective altruism is of course something that it's not totally new, but it's getting more and more hype in the movement. And while there are many people who think this is something really exciting and something really great and new, there's also some criticism to this concept. So what we wanted to do is to have a panel discussion. So we have here representatives who are partly very much in favor of effective altruism and some who are critical of it. What we want to do is first have Max give us a quick introduction. What is effective altruism about? Just a quick introduction. And then I have prepared 2 topics that can be discussed by the panelists. And after that, we want to open it for further discussion to the audience. So you can then either contribute yourself to the discussion or ask questions. Since we don't have unlimited time, it is important that all the contributions, also from the panelists, but also from the audience, are somewhat time boxed. So please don't talk more than 3 or 4 minutes, because otherwise it will be impossible to have many people participate. So I think Max can start and give us an introduction now. The mic should be on. No, it's not. Take this one. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks Heiko. Thanks everyone for being here. As Heiko said, what I want to start with is to introduce effective altruism and to clarify a bit, hopefully, how it relates to other currents within the animal advocacy movement. So first, what is effective altruism, both as a philosophy and as a growing social movement? The starting point of effective altruism is to observe that we are unfortunately faced with enormous ethical challenges, such as, for instance, factory farming, and that we should do something about it, really use our time and our money to improve this situation. But then the next step is to recognize, okay, we shouldn't just do something, but we should be ambitious in our activism, in the sense that we should really, really try to make sure to do the most good we can. That is, to contribute as much as possible to solving those great ethical challenges. For instance, we should really try to make sure that we spare as many animals as possible the horrendous life in a factory farm. So now you have a rough idea of what effective altruism is, and it's a rather young movement. The name was only coined in 2011, I believe. So what I want to do next is to say a little bit about in what sense effective altruism is similar to more traditional views within the animal advocacy movement, and where it contributes new ideas or efforts. First, how is effective altruism similar to positions we are already familiar with from the animal advocacy movement? So one point here is the position that we should often prioritize helping farm animals, because they suffer in a much, much greater number as compared with other animals that suffer by human hands. And this is something other organizations and individuals within animal advocacy have been saying for a long time. Second, of course, the idea to be as effective as possible isn't exactly new. So effective altruism hasn't invented this, and people, especially within the animal advocacy movement, have tried to do this even before effective altruism. And what they also did is to try to use empirical evidence to determine which actions are the most effective ones. So for instance, the organization Vegan Outreach in the US has done studies on which of their leaflets are most effective in causing dietary changes toward veganism before effective altruism was a thing. Okay. But I think that in addition to this, effective altruism really does also contribute new ideas and efforts to the movement. And one thing here is that my impression is that effective altruism puts even more emphasis on being really, really totally open-minded about what the most effective route to our goal could be. So for instance, is it even the most effective strategy to try to increase the number of vegans through means such as leaflets or online ads? Or are maybe other routes more effective, that is, save more animals in expectation? For instance, maybe technological innovation is more promising, so maybe we should try to figure out how we can get cultured meat or other meat replacement and dairy and egg replacement products. Or maybe political strategies will be more effective. So maybe we should do more political campaigns, for instance, demanding fundamental rights for animals. And in order to answer those questions, effective altruism as a movement tries to channel resources also into research about what of those strategies is the most effective one. And this doesn't only mean more of the studies the organization Vegan Outreach did, but also drawing on other kinds of evidence. For instance, the organization Animal Charity Evaluators based in the US has an ongoing research project on examining other social movements and tries to learn lessons from those movements for our movements. So we also try to incorporate historical evidence, for instance. And this kind of empirical research and trying to use reason and evidence in order to determine which of our actions are most effective at helping others is only one example of what we like to call meta-activism. This is the idea that in addition to all the activists that try to help animals directly, and of course this is very, very important, we also need another kind of activism that first tries to increase our capability to help. For instance, through research, but also through fundraising and through movement building, that is growing the movement in terms of the number of people in the movement or the amount of money we have available to reach our goals. And one particular example that illustrates this kind of meta-activism well is earning to give. This is the idea that as an individual, you can do a large amount of good by just having a regular job and donating a large part of your income to effective organizations. So for instance, a school teacher in Switzerland can easily earn 10,000 euros per month and could maybe donate 6,000 euros per month to effective animal advocacy organizations and could thereby finance the position of 2 or 3 full-time activists working in countries such as Germany or Austria, where the wages are lower than in Switzerland. And I believe, so this is really a novel idea. I believe that effective altruism has contributed to the movement, and it is really important in particular for the animal advocacy movement, because one problem I believe a lot of you are familiar with is that the turnover of activists in our movement is very high. So one number I saw recently quoted in I believe even in a radio show where Martin was interviewed for, was that 90% of activists in Austria drop out after 2 years, or drop out of animal activism. And so I believe one reason for this is that it's very hard to sustain this kind of activism financially. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as a universal basic income. So we need to find other ways to sustain our activism financially. And so the solution that part of the movement does earning to give to finance the other part is a kind of direct action, as it were, to just contribute to solving this problem if we can't implement the correct political framework that enables activism for everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to give this introduction. And finally, I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Effective altruists value critical thinking and discussion a lot. So I'm also very much looking forward to discussing critical views. And thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. So this was a very quick introduction, of course. Some of you in the morning plenary said you had already heard about effective altruism. Actually, most of you had said that. So you probably have some ideas of what it's about. I think one of the topic which is mentioned a lot, and you also just mentioned it again, and this is one thing I would like to start with, is the earning to give concept. You now gave an example of a teacher in Switzerland. Switzerland is a very small country, so there cannot be that too many teachers in Switzerland that can do that. One example that I keep hearing is investment bankers who make a lot of money, so we should, and I think in Frankfurt, at least in Germany, the example is oftentimes, we have some investment bankers in Frankfurt who make a lot of money and they can donate a certain amount. So my question would be, the type of jobs in our society, maybe Switzerland is a small exception, but most other countries, the jobs where you can really make a lot of money so that you can actually have leftover money to donate, which will make a reasonable impact, are typically the jobs which are not the most ethical jobs. So typically the jobs where you make a lot of money are the jobs where you are part of the exploiting system. So my question would be, how do you how can it be possible to use this concept by not actually sustaining or making the exploitative system even more stable when you're actually trying to fight it? Is it clear what my question was? Okay, so maybe you have some thoughts on that? Who wants to start? I mean, maybe somebody, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I have another aspect of the earning to give concept, I can maybe just add it, which is, that's one problem I see, but one other problem is also, if that's a general message, like it's very important to donate, and if you can earn much money, you should donate, instead of the message, get active and get involved in the movement and do something yourself. And of course I see the problem that we need to sustain activism, but I also think we should look at what activism does to people who get involved in it and what kind of attitude towards society or towards social problems we want to see, and also in order to be effective. So that's maybe one point that, of course, I'm critical of certain ideas of effective altruism, but not of the general principle, let's be effective. That would be absurd to be against that. So I think in order to be an effective animal rights movement, we need to encourage people to kind of get out of a certain position in society that is too far spread at the moment. Namely, the idea we're just passive consumers and we delegate our responsibility to other agents like the government or by to companies by buying things, to the government by voting, for example. And I think we have to get back to an idea of we are citizens and we are agents in society that can do and ask for change ourselves. And I think that this kind of change in an attitude towards society is essential to building a bigger social movement that can really also change institutions then. And so I think, of course, if you do the earning to give in a kind of small amount, and I think it's not that new actually, because of course people earlier, when they realized we cannot all be active all the time, some people take jobs and support others. So that's not a problem, I think. It makes sense because somewhere the money has to come from. But if that's the message, kind of go and take jobs and donate money, and I think it is often a message. If you look at the website of animal charity evaluators, they talk much and much and much about donating, and then they have a little thing in the menu that says volunteering. And then they say it's also nice, if you don't have money, you can also volunteer. And then it's only volunteering for one of the effective organizations that is recommended. And it's not, think about what you can do in your area. Maybe if there's not a group, you can found a group. Like all that sort of stuff that basically leads to grassroots activism, which I think is very important for the movement, is not mentioned, even though it's not theoretically excluded, of course, but it's not being talked about.
First, I want to say that I'm not in the business of telling anyone what to do. So if I'm sort of sitting here now to criticize that position, I'm not telling them you are wrong and you should do this and that, or telling anybody. I also want to say that I obviously appreciate activity and thinking about effectiveness is very important. And also, when I bring my criticism now, I don't want to see it, even if it might sound like it, as black and white. Obviously, I have to put this argument forth and not the counter-argument, because this is sort of the other's business. But that doesn't mean that I don't see that there is more gray area. But having said that, Heiko's question, referring to Heiko's question, I have, obviously I'm part of running a group called VGD. We have donators who give us money. And that's also important, very important as a role in a movement, but I perceive our role mainly as triggering or helping to trigger a mass movement. I have a bit of an issue with the thought of revolution, and be it not physically but mentally or system-wise, that is coming top-down, or that there are sort of some NGO bosses who just think it up and then they delegate all the jobs to do, and then the revolution is there. A revolution is something that must come from bottom up. So what we need to do is trigger self-responsibility, trigger activity on the ground. So we try to do that by being, firstly, a totally non-hierarchical organization. And I'm not sure how much that is seen as a positive step when you do an EA analysis. We will see. I hope we will be evaluated soon, but then we'll hear that. But I mean, we have no bosses. We have meetings. We have plenary discussions. We have as much participation as possible by anybody who is there, who can decide where the money is spent. Our group is aiming for setting up new groups in their own mind, autonomous groups who run their own campaigns, who create their own whatever campaign targets and their own campaign material, because I feel that this creative participation is what is necessary to achieve a political change. And that is sort of my criticism of this neoliberal business style approach to a revolution, that you try to outcompete the big multinational businesses by being a bit better in doing advertisements. I think we should come from bottom up and paint graffiti over their advertisements and just remove it, rip it down, and bring new ideas up from bottom up. And also the idea of delegating responsibility is contrary to this view of revolution. Revolution is something that should grip people. There should be a spirit that should drive them. There should be mass demos. There should be mass resistance. There should be mass boycott. And if you say, I've already paid my donation, I've done my bit. This is sort of delegating responsibility and sort of moving away from my vision of how revolution should actually happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to comment on. I'll just take a few. Maybe starting with the last, you said, Martin, you're not in the business of telling anybody what to do, but you have certain opinions about how it should happen. And that's, of course, that's very natural. But I would say, like, I don't mind how it happens. And I don't know if it has to be a revolution. I don't know if it has to be coming from bottom up. I just want it to happen. And I don't care how it happens. And I think for it to happen, we do need money. And we certainly need people who are changing, and we need people who are participating. But we also need people, we need money to recruit all these people. We need money to advertise this whole cause. We need money to do all kinds of things. And the reason why I think ACE may be, for instance, emphasizing the donating a bit more, or much more, as you have the perception, than the activism is also, I think, because within the animal rights movement, donations or the fact that you can make a difference with your money within our movement, it has not been very prevalent. It has not been very prevalent, I think, and we've always been thinking like we have to go vegan and that's the best thing we can do, but we can also do so much with our money. So we can do actually much more, I think, with that, with our communication also, than with being vegan or than with being an activist. Then about getting into jobs that Heiko said, getting into jobs that are maybe damaging to society, etc. Well, first of all, it doesn't have to be, like you said, doesn't have to be a high amount. I mean, we don't have to become all bankers. I don't earn a lot and I give 10%, but if everybody would do that, then we would have masses of money, I think. Also, if you go into a damaging job, I mean, the question is if you don't, there will be another person doing that, and they will not give that money. So I don't know if you have made a lot of gain that way. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think, some of the comments. I think it's not an either or. It's not effectiveness or something else. It's not like donating or being active. I think it's perfectly both. But I think the emphasis has been on being active, and now I think it's good that there's more emphasis on the value of money and the value of donations for our activism. And I think we've grown tremendously as a movement because of a very big influx of money from donors in the last few years, especially.
Yeah, thanks, Tobias. I want to connect to something you said. It's not an either or. And this is a point I would really like to stress with respect to earning to give. Because I think it's not about either donating or becoming active, about either doing earning to give or to be part of the movement. I think the people who do earning to give, they should be part of the movement, and in practice they very, very often are, and we should embrace them as part of the movement. So obviously if you earn 10,000 euro, as I said, and donate maybe 6,000 of those 10,000 euros, you obviously have to be highly motivated and be on board with this movement. And this isn't just a hypothetical situation. So I know several people who do this, colleagues of mine, and those aren't people who believe, oh, after I donated my 10% or whatever, I have done my share. Quite to the contrary, they often do volunteer in their personal time still for our cause. They are active. They don't focus on donating exclusively. And so it's important, I believe, to keep in mind that, yeah, it's not about us versus them. It's we aren't targeting sort of random people on the street and tell them they can buy absolution. We try to add another way where people can make a really valuable contribution to the movement, as to the tool set of our movement. And those people, they really are activists. They just use another way of activism. And then to the point, Heiko mentioned investment bankers, but you don't have to be an investment banker. You can be, as I said, you can be a doctor, you can be a teacher, and you can save lives directly as a doctor and still multiply your impact by donating a lot of money. I believe it's worth to keep this in mind. And lastly, so it's right, there are also people working in finance who donate a lot of money, but even then I believe you can ask, so if we agree, I'm not sure to what extent this is true, but yeah, if we agree that like the system is the problem and we should overcome the system, then we can ask, how can we hurt the system most? And I believe it's not by staying out of the system, but by taking as much money out of the system as possible. So if one person doesn't get this job in finance, then someone else will, and the system will continue to work. And this other person won't take a large share of his income and channel it from the system into our movement. But this one person pursuing earning to give, they will do it, and I believe they will hurt the system much more by their action than they maybe could have done through other ways. So it's really also a way of fighting the system from within, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I think Martin wanted to respond to something real quick that Tobias had said.
Yeah, quite a brief, tiny comment. It's interesting that this debate on how to raise funds is one-directional. You know, the more funds, the better. And that sounds very understandable. The more money I have, the more I can invest, the more people I can employ. But there is a mechanism that actually is preventing effectiveness when you're getting bigger and bigger. And I've seen that the last 30 years with many organizations, like 4Paws have been mentioned, and I don't want to criticize 4Paws, doing brilliant things, but I saw them when they started, and I saw their idealistic small groups and their actions and activities. And I saw over the decades how that changed when they became bigger and bigger and business-like. And the idealism goes out of the window. Ever more money goes into bureaucracy. People become to appeal ever more to the mainstream. So if you're doing a demo or stall for them, you need to look neat and businesslike, and everything must be neat and tidy and to look exactly as whatever the top says it should. And this is coming out from whatever, psychological investigations of how you look so that the mainstream likes you. And the demand's getting lower and lower. And you are forced, basically, really forced to appeal to those people who donate your money because you fear that if this stops, you can remove all half of your group. So you're becoming ever more mainstream and ever more ineffective. And so last word to that. Indeed, with our plenary meetings, we often in VGT have to debate, are we not too big? I mean, it sounds really stupid to some of you maybe, but this is really a topic that's coming up ever again. Maybe we're becoming too big. Maybe we should not have so much money and getting donations. I mean, you know, not black and white. I'm happy about donations. But there is a point saying that we shouldn't be too big. Small is beautiful, and only small, decentralized, autonomous groups all across the country can do this kind of revolution that we need.
Okay. Do you still need to answer to that directly, or can we go to the next? Yeah, okay.
I mean, if you think this is a real problem, I think it's possible that organizations develop in that way, and I've seen it happen. But if you think it's a problem, I mean, then there's still ways to use the money effectively, and you just give it to another organization that's small and that can grow a little bit bigger. I mean, you don't have to use it for yourself. So the value of money remains, I think. So it's not because you would do bad things with it, maybe, that you can't use it in another way. That's good.
Yeah, maybe also very briefly, so effective altruism doesn't intrinsically value big organizations in some sense. So if you show us like evidence that having several small organizations is more effective, then we are happy to embrace this approach. Yeah.
Okay. So one thing that I wanted to suggest also for discussion, I think it was also already mentioned in some contributions, the concept of letting other people do something for you, which basically alienates the people who are active in the movement right now. I mean, if they would follow some of the suggestions, at least as far as I've understood them from the effective altruism, you should rather have people who are very good and let them do the stuff for you, and you should rather give them the money. Okay, that's again the earning to give principle. But isn't that the problem, that you kind of alienate the activists from the movement, because you don't have the activists or the big majority develop the ideas, but you have a few people who are possibly better at doing it, developing it, but then the rest of the people don't really connect to these principles. It seems to me like some alienation that could happen because of this principle. Not only that activists get alienated from the goals of the movement because they are no longer part of the people who are developing these ideas, but also that the movement itself seems to be being a little bit more divided. So now we have organizations whose main goal is basically to evaluate other organizations on how effective they are. And obviously some are going to be the most effective and the others are not going to be effective. And isn't this something that is somehow really going to split or divide the movement into the effective and the not effective, or the effective as according to the EA principles and the not effective according to the EA principle? Isn't this something that seems to be somehow splitting the movement? You don't have that fear? Or is that something that could possibly happen? I have the feeling maybe it could happen. Is that something?
Maybe JC from the audience can answer this better, being from animal charity evaluators, how they see this.
Is he here?
I think, right, JC? Are you here?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so we have to do it ourselves.
Okay.
I think this might be a danger we should be mindful of in the way we, that is effective altruism in general, and the organization within the movement communicate our ideas. But I believe it's not in any way a necessary problem of effective altruism, because rather than dividing the movement, I believe we strive to grow and build the movement, and adding, as I said before, adding more ways even more people can contribute to our cause. instead of, so we also aren't in the business of telling people what to do to a greater extent than maybe everyone to a certain degree is in this business, because everyone, of course, naturally has certain opinions on why they choose one form of activity or activism over another. So I believe we can emphasize that everyone can contribute to the movement, be it through direct activism, be it through donating, be it as a public figure or an intellectual who influences a lot of people, be it as a researcher who, for instance, develops cultured meat or other beneficial technologies. Instead of dividing the movement, we are, I would like to think, drawing attention to many different ways how more people than we thought of before can contribute to the movement. And also, effective altruism, we try to be very open. So there is, for instance, this effective altruism forum on the internet. It's completely public, and everyone can contribute there to the discussion. And we of course invite everyone to contribute there. It's not that we want to have a movement where only a subset of people sets the agenda or the strategies. We believe discussion is very important.
Some more to that concrete topic, or? Yeah. Okay. So one more question in general. Oh, you okay? Yeah.
Yeah. I surely agree that judging or testing the effectivity of your campaigns is vital, but then there's always the measure you use. What effective towards what? And in practice, although it hasn't been sort of said now, but in practice, my observation of EA effectiveness analysis is that it's consequentialist. So essentially, there is a sea of suffering. This is sort of seems to me the picture. There is lots and lots of suffering, and what the best we can do is just try to reduce it. Never mind what is the cause of the suffering. So if there's a big avalanche, or if there's a big multinational that does it systematically, it doesn't matter. Just reduce the suffering. There is no perpetrator. There is no sort of system change idea that actually. If you change the system, eventually the cause will be removed, and then there might be a suffering change. This analysis is, to my feeling, a bit missing. So the whole thing becomes very apolitical, and my view is, as you might have seen in my first talk a couple of days ago, that we need to approach a system change. The system is the problem. The system is evil, not the people. And what we need to do is change the system. And this aspect is, at least so far, in my view, a bit underrepresented in EA.
Can I just add something to that? Yeah, that's also an important point I wanted to make. And of course I see that it's not theoretically excluded, so that's what many effective altruists claim, that they say, if you show me that this kind of strategy to change the system will eventually save more animals than what I suggested as a strategy, then let's do that. And I also see that there are interesting discussions going on about learning from other social movements, etc. And all that's good. But I think one problem is that the favored method that is being used at the moment in like what I can read, and also if you look at the books that are kind of representing effective altruism, like the Peter Singer book and the book by William McAskill, then it's very much about quantifying results. And this whole quantifying method, like you calculate how much money you need to save, and with this organization to save these many animals, for example, or these many people, or these many life years, etc. And the problem with that is, I think that for small questions like how many people take my leaflet, or how many people consider or go vegan after receiving my leaflet, it's perfectly fine. We should do that. It's very interesting for these kind of goals. But for the goals that are more like that go deeper, like how do we shift public debate? How do we weaken the animal industry? How do we strengthen the movement? Like that kind of things. I find it hard to see how they can actually be quantified, or how the results of our strategies can be quantified. That doesn't mean that they cannot be evaluated. Of course, we should evaluate them. But really the kind of calculations I read then in the books and also sometimes on like the animal charity evaluators website, that look rather ridiculous to me in a way, because they just estimate things, they put kind of price tags and things on considerations, and the actual work is done by these estimates, which are arbitrary to a certain degree. And after all, what they're doing is arguing the same way we would all argue about what, with rational arguments, what we think is likely to achieve change. And it's not a new method, but it's presented as like more scientific, more reliable than what we're normally doing. So for example, when I gave a talk yesterday on that we should change certain economic, political, cultural conditions, then I was criticized for not having empirical data to back these up, even though I think for the claims I made, there just not are these kind of data available. There are, again, of course, empirical experiences and insights available, like experience from other social movements, but you cannot put it into numbers, I think. And just one example for a kind of absurd calculation is in the William McAskill book, is that a young woman thinks about how can she do the most good in society, and she thinks she has to decide between either earning to give, like earning much money and donating it to effective organizations, or trying to get a job in parliament, or trying to get a member of the parliament in Britain. That's the example. So then they calculate how big are her chances to actually get into parliament, and since she studies the right subject in Oxford, her chances are very good. And then they have to calculate how much good she could do if she actually succeeds in getting into parliament. And then they try to calculate, and then the idea is we have to somehow put it into numbers, like how much she will achieve. So they try to discover how big a part of the state money she can actually influence, after all. So they end up with, like, if she gets it, she can influence these many millions of state money to go to good causes. And all of that happens without a hint of a discussion of what you can actually, like what the causes of problems in society are, what the parliament, how the parliament works, without considering that working in parliament, she might, in a few years later, maybe not have the same goals anymore, and like without, an analysis of social causes of the problems, and that just seems to me to be, very naive and very absurd.
Yes, thanks for those points. So first of all, I think we should, I totally acknowledge that we can't, that quantification has its limits, and I believe everyone in effective altruism would agree to this. I believe there is some value in illustrating where quantification can be useful, and maybe overall, if we look at the current state of affairs, quantification is used overall a little bit too little. Therefore, I think it has some value if people in those books illustrate how you can use quantification in your reasoning. But I totally agree that it has its limits. And in fact, if you dig a little bit deeper and look at the websites of core effective altruist organizations such as Animal Charity Evaluators that was mentioned, or GiveWell, the charity evaluator that evaluates global poverty charities, you will find quite nuanced positions on the value of quantification, where they totally acknowledge that the method of choosing the right action cannot be putting numbers on anything, estimating it, as you said, and then going for the result with the highest number. So they totally acknowledge that you have to factor in your uncertainty and so on and so forth. But still...
For the number, the uncertainty, you add in...
No. 2 points maybe. So first of all, to give one example, to stress that sometimes numbers can be useful. I think it's useful for us as a movement to know that most most land animals that are slaughtered are chickens, for instance. So this is an empirical fact, and it is embodied in a certain number, like saying that 90% or whatever the exact number is of land animals slaughtered for food are chickens. And if we didn't know this, we would be totally oblivious to the fact that it's actually very dangerous to argue that people should shift their consumptions from beef and so on to chickens. Some people argued this, and if we didn't know the facts, we wouldn't know that we should intervene there, that this is a very bad thing for the animals. So this is one example where knowing the numbers is crucial. Another thing is we don't. I wouldn't say that it's true that we put numbers on anything. Very often, when evidence is scarce, when we don't have numbers, instead of making numbers up and then going for this kind of reasoning, it's better to use certain weak heuristic principles in reasoning. I would totally acknowledge this. And one of those heuristics could be, okay, if we want to come to this point of social change, if we want to achieve large-scale social change, then a heuristical principle would be, okay, there are different strategies we have available, and their effectiveness will vary depending on how many people are already on board with the cause. And it seems that if an idea is still very controversial and very new, and in the case of our movement, this is the case. Unfortunately, 98% of the population, or whatever the exact number is, still eats meat. So it's not like we have mass support. And then a heuristical principle is, okay, we can't just emulate strategies other mass movements could use that had large-scale support in society, because unfortunately we don't have the support. And so instead, it's maybe important to use other strategies. For instance, if we look at the history, one interesting example is. So I said effective altruism contributed earning to give as a novel idea, but in a certain sense this isn't exactly true, because a perhaps unlikely figure did something like this, Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels worked as a capitalist to enable Karl Marx write his books, write The Capital. And this was at a stage where they did not yet have mass support. So they had to use somewhat innovative strategies that exploit the current system as good as possible, and only then, at some later stage, this kind of social justice movement was able to use other kind of mass movement strategies, such as large-scale protests and so on. And this is one example. I haven't used very much numbers, I believe, now in stating this argument. So. Okay. Yeah, we totally can do it and embrace this kind of reasoning without numbers.
Okay, I have one more question which I want to quickly ask to the panel before we move to questions from the audience. So this effective altruism idea is quite new still, so it probably might be hard to show too many results yet, but I think there are some, or at least there seem to be certain aspects which are evaluated to be more effective from effective altruism idea. So would it be possible to give some examples or talk about some concrete campaigns and discuss what makes them so effective and maybe not so effective? Just some concrete examples that could be used to illustrate what would now be something which would be now new from an effective altruism concept compared to what has been done in the past, or something like that. So to make it a little bit more concrete, based on examples, what is effective and what is not, and why would something be effective from an effective altruism concept compared to what we would have considered effective in the past? Or, yeah.
We have in Vienna quite some strong believers in effective altruism, and we love each other, no worry. But there is some kind of alienation with some aspects of our activity. And I want to voice that now because this is exactly the examples that I'm talking about. There's, for once, there is this aspect that has been mentioned here, that the chickens are killed in far larger numbers and they have far less meat on them, obviously. So if you eat the same amount of meat, then it's better to eat a pig or even a whale than a chicken, because obviously you eat far fewer individuals. And if you have this view of reducing suffering, then that is a very effective campaign. But this is a campaign that we as VGD would never do, because I see no political gain and no system change in it at all. And this is sort of the standard that I would put forth. I want to increase the respect towards animals and have a political shift in the system. And I wouldn't see that in this campaign at all, so I would be totally opposed to that. The same thing turned around a bit. We do, as I've shown in the morning, a campaign against canned hunting. And our EA friends actually don't like that campaign at all, for a number of reasons. One is that it's just few animals, just a few 100,000. Why don't you look at chickens? There are 77 million. But, and secondly, they say that the canned hunt leads to meat that is, after all, produced free range. So isn't it better they do that instead of factory farmed meat? So if you ban canned hunting, there might be a shift towards factory farmed meat, suffering increases. So banned hunting campaign, to ban canned hunting campaign, canned hunting is bad. My argument why we do this campaign is not reduce suffering with these numbers, but it is a political change, as you might expect. And that comes from the point that this kind of activity is solely for fun. There are people who enjoy chasing animals and shooting them. And this is sort of the first step towards respect for animals. That activity like that is completely abolished and should be abhorred by everybody and should be socially inadequate. Before you can challenge the meat system, I mean, I don't say you should all go for canned hunting, but before you challenge the meat system, there must be a clear opinion in society that for fun, for mere enjoyment of yourself in your leisure time, you should never ever abuse an animal. So I think this is therefore a vital campaign for respect towards animals increase in society and a political campaign. So this is where we differ in practice. And an example for the past is our circus campaign. It took a lot of effort. We stood sometimes 50, 60 times a month in front of the same circus to protest a lot of time. And what about 16 elephants and a similar number of lions and bears, whoever distributing vegan outreach, according to some statistics, you could save animals far quicker. But again, this is enjoyment, this is leisure. There's somebody just having, I want to be entertained, show me an elephant making fun of itself, or him or herself, or a lion jumping through a burning wire, whatever. We got rid of this, and it changed the attitude, in my view. There were radio programs before the ban that said, yeah, this is a tradition, and we uphold traditions. And nowadays, the general tone in media talking about wild animals in a circus is always, this is an anachronistic thing. In the old days when we were not respecting animals, this is what we were doing. So I think it's a great achievement, even if the number of animals spared suffering is very small. So this is where I see sort of differences creeping up.
I'm not necessarily sure whether this is a fundamental difference. To illustrate Sentience Politics, the organization I work for, we are currently running a political campaign demanding basic rights for primates in the Swiss canton of Basel. And obviously, we are aware of the fact that the number of primates in Basel is much lower than the number of, say, chickens that are slaughtered every year. And still, we do this campaign and believe it's a very effective thing. Maybe this is also can serve as the example Heiko asked for. And why are we doing this? The explanation I now give, I believe, wouldn't sound too different from what you said, Martin. We are doing this because we can get a lot of media attention with this campaign. We can get a societal discussion off the ground. For instance, because of the way the system works in Switzerland, every household in Basel will get the written up arguments by us, by mail. So everyone will receive this, and people are really forced, in a certain sense, at least if they want to take part in the public vote that will happen. A large number of people is forced to think about non-human animals and whether they should have rights and how they are treating them and so on. So we think this is a very effective way to change society and maybe eventually to change the system. And the mere fact that there are fewer primates than chickens or whatever isn't a reason for effective altruists not to consider such campaigns. We are doing them ourselves. A more fundamental point maybe is you mentioned, okay, those hunters, they do it for enjoyment. And this should be relevant when we choose between different actions, what kind of campaign targets we choose. And so I believe there is some valid point here, namely that the observation that hunters, for instance, may have sort of bad motives. This is relevant when we judge the moral character of the hunters. So there is a difference maybe between the hunters and other perpetrators. But I believe this isn't the most important question to ask. So to illustrate, if I am hurt because some other person hurts me and I suffer because of this, my primary interest is for this suffering to end. And if you want to help me, I would want you to choose the most effective method for ending the suffering. And it wouldn't be like my primary interest that you evaluate the moral character of this other agent. This can be important in some situations, of course, but I believe given the fact that we face a moral catastrophe such as factory farming, where there is a horrendous amount of suffering, the primary emphasis should be on finding those actions that end as much of the suffering as possible, and we shouldn't so much discuss those virtue ethical points about what actors have what kind of motivation.
I agree with that, and just to another attempt to reconcile what we are saying, maybe Martin, you talk about political change and attitude change as something effective and as the thing you are aiming at, and I agree that we need attitude change and political change, but suppose that tomorrow we invent clean meat, cultured meat, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we have to call it clean meat. That we invented, and it's suddenly everywhere, and everybody's eating it, and nobody's eating meat anymore. At that moment, there's no political change, there's no attitude change. But can you imagine how attitude and political change could be speeded up by that process? So the attitude change follows the behavior change here. So I think that way we do something first that reduces the suffering across the board for all these animals that are not eaten. And because people are less dependent on eating animals, they're not dependent on it anymore, their mind opens up to start thinking about all these political animal rights, autonomy, and all the issues that we both care about. So I think it can be perfectly reconciled.
No? Okay, I think now it's time that we could also start taking questions from the audience, because we only have like 15 minutes left. Who would like to start with a question or even a contribution? Okay, I think you probably want to talk about the animal charity evaluators.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was taking notes on things I wanted to say, just to contribute some evidence on both sides of the issue. And again, I work for animal charity evaluators for context. So for the earning to give discussion originally, it's actually true that most effective altruists who have thought a lot about this think a relatively small proportion of effective altruists should earn to give. Numbers have ranged between 10 to 30%, which means that for most of the people coming into the effective altruism movement, we probably do want to drive them towards activism or other roles like going into institutions like political ones and having influence there and whatnot. So estimates have ranged pretty low, which means we're not thinking of it as like the dominant message or what most people would be going into, especially not something like investment banking, which is a good personal fit for probably a relatively small number of people. About ACE talking about donating a lot. So most of ACE's research so far has been on effective donations and where donors should give to. There are the other aspects of what organizations should do and what individual activists should do. We just don't have as much research in those areas. So on our website right now, there's more emphasis on the donations, largely because that's what we know about. But we're working on it, and we have a website redesign coming up that's going to emphasize other areas more. On earning to give again, there's an analysis by 80,000 Hours, which is an effective altruism career advice organization. And it's on the harm done by earning to give careers, specifically in finance. And then comparing that to the potential benefit from the donations and seeing, well, is there actually a very large amount of harm? And the results are, it's kind of uncertain depending on where you give. But if you give to the very most effective charities, the analysis indicated that it probably was worth whatever sort of harm you end up doing in finance. But it's debatable. There are a lot of details there that are highly uncertain. On division coming from talking about effectiveness. So I think we actually have some empirical evidence here. ACE has been around for a few years. We're still relatively young and learning a lot. But we've been having these discussions about effectiveness. And for example, we talk to a lot of organizations who we don't end up recommending, but then we talk to them about how they can potentially become more effective. And so far, we've gotten really good results. We've had a lot of people who came in uncertain and were worried about that division, but then we talked to them and they said like, oh yeah, like actually you taught us something new about our charity. You know, we didn't realize that maybe we were having that perception from the public that could be harmful. So I think there's room for cooperation from effectiveness discussions, and not as much division so far, but we should keep an eye out for it because more might happen in the future. And then finally, on quantification, I wanted to mention that ACE has 7 different criteria that we judge charities on, or at least conduct our evaluations based on. And one of those is quantitative. One of those is the estimates. But of course, that's what everyone ends up talking about because that's what can get controversial and everyone has an opinion on. But it's 1 out of 7. So lots of it is qualitative evaluation. For a couple of our charities last year, the Non-Human Rights Project, which is doing that personhood stuff, which I'm glad we got agreement on that, like that sort of change can be really impactful. We don't even have a quantitative evaluation for that organization. We just didn't think it was useful. And same for another organization. Yeah, that's about all I have.
Okay, was that just a contribution or is there something to add to that from the panel?
Yes, gather more opinions.
Yeah, okay, get some more opinions, some more questions. So, from this side.
Thank you. As my daily job, I work for a fund. You could argue that I'm in the public sector. We fund the NGO sector in Estonia. And I just wanted to contribute to this discussion from then that point of view. What's happening currently, at least in Estonia and in several other countries in the civil society in general, is that we are, as Tobias was pointing out in his lecture earlier, becoming more professional. And one part of it is actually measuring your impact and measuring whether your time resources or monetary resources are going to the right place. So it's important for us to actually think about that as organizations as well. How do we measure our own impact? And from the funder side, in Estonia, it's already to that level that we will in the future probably not give out funding to any organization that hasn't assessed their impact. It can be monetary, it can be, as an NGO, you can measure it in many, many ways. One other point I wanted to make is that I feel the conversation stays on the level very much of the activist side, but when you take, for instance, the example of social impact bonds, which also tries to solve social problems that we have, but do it in cooperation between the third sector, the corporate sector, and the public sector, then you can see that facing the problems we have currently in the world, we need to bridge also that gap that we are keeping in our heads as if the third sector and the corporate sector and the public sector are something different. We're all people, and it's also a man-made seclusion. So we need to bridge also that gap and maybe try to really to what you are doing also with effective altruism, think in all aspects, very intersectionally, where are we putting our resources? And I guess for us here, it's in the animal rights section, and it's very needed, and we need to keep on doing that work, but to keep in mind that the problems are far bigger. So when I'm donating my money, aside from doing the work here, I'm donating for the causes where I can see that they are creating the impact, where I can't contribute my time, but they are also solving it impactfully. In case of Estonia, is the Human Rights Center. So yeah, just I wanted to, I guess, broaden it a little bit and give the funder side. So I hope I managed.
Okay, thank you. So something to add to that? Some more? Okay, there was somebody raising their hand back there right from the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. Brilliant discussion. I love the setup, the whole EA on trial thing. I think it's really good that when new ideas get introduced to the movement, that we critically examine them. Yet I also think that it's really important that when we use the introduction of new ideas to critically examine the movement in a sense. And I think we should also try and flip the script. What has the normal movement so far produced in ways of measuring our efficiency? How do we make the best choices? And I think that's a way that we should use this movement as well. Not just all the numbers and stuff, but constantly critically reflect on what we're doing. And so far, I only thing that pops up is horoscopes or something like that. So.
Can you repeat the last bit?
It was just a bad joke.
Some comments to that? Nothing? Okay.
We talked a lot already.
I have the impression, at least from what has been the result from this discussion so far, is that actually some of the aspects of effective altruism are basically the same as we've always been doing. I hope it's not too extreme, but at least from the when Martin gave his examples, and then Max basically said they're actually doing the same, or they could do the same. And then when we were talking about earning to give, you said, okay, some people only give a little bit, but that's what everybody's been doing forever. So I personally still have the problem seeing what is new in effective altruism to compare to what we've been doing forever. I have not, in this discussion, really found it. Anybody has some suggestion or some comments on exactly that? What is really new in effective altruism compared to what we've always been doing? Something from the panel or not? Okay. So.
Thank you very much. I would like to agree to Heiko first that my impression is that you four up there very much agree on many things, and this could be a good starting point for a further fair discussion about empirical things, what is the most effective. And to answer this question, I would like to tell, so one thing I've noticed in the movement before, in most cases is like this, before someone becomes vegan, our society, our education is very capitalistic, and we learn to get money, so to earn money, to get good jobs, and then to consume. If we earn much money, we can afford to buy many things which we all don't really need. What happens if people become vegan? They notice there is a consumption part, so through their consumption they can have some good effect on the world. And what changes is really their consumption. But we still don't have a donation culture. And this is what I really like about effective altruism. For example, if you consider someone living in Germany earning not 10 but 20 euros an hour and having a full-time job, and basically talking about some mean values of how much money do I need. Maybe I need 10 euros having a full-time job per hour to live a okay life. What happens if a vegan person gets 20 euros per hour? And I don't want to judge anyone, but I've seen this a couple of times. The people are still thinking so much about consumption that they have to change the world via consumption. And what happens, instead of, for example, if the salary changes from 10 to 20 euros, they stop buying shoes for 40 euros in the normal supermarket. They go to a vegan shop and buy shoes for 200 euros. And the only thing which changes there is, for example, that in the new shoes there is no unvegan glue. But if they donated the 10 euros that they has gotten more in this change of their salary, they could finance one additional full-time vegan activist. And comparing these two things, I think this is an aspect many people don't really think about, that we really need this kind of donation culture in our movement and in the whole society.
I would have a brief comment on that, if I may, which is just to maybe point to a difference that I still see, even though, of course, I acknowledge that there are many points we have in comparison and that we should talk about more and discuss and stuff. But I still see a difference in how we conceive of how social change works. So if I really take these ideas seriously, the impression I get is what you want in order to achieve the vegan world, for example, is many more people donating, many more people working in effective organizations, and like division of labor. Some people donate, more people are active in some sense. But I see then you have these, like, in a way, normal society. People have jobs, and normally they have either jobs or they work in an NGO, and then the money flows from the people who have jobs to the people in the NGO, and they do something good with it, and also discuss with the people who gave the money, etc., etc. But in a way, that doesn't challenge the fundamental kind of passivity that I think is a problem in society. Or I would be in this point with what Martin Balluch said before, that what we need, in my view, to not just have some more vegan options, not just have a few % more vegans, which is of course good, but I'm very doubtful that the percentages will just go up and up and up, because I think there are just too many people who in the current society don't think about ethically what they consume and will not do so, just as it's similar with organic food at the moment. But what we need is that more people kind of conceive themselves as citizens active to change things and go to take their demands to the streets, take their demands to the industry, take their demands to the places where violence happens. And for that also we need an analysis of what is caused. So in my view, effective altruists often talk about all the suffering and all the death and how that's all very bad and calls us to act on it. But it talks very little about that the animals not just suffer, but they are being confined by certain institutions that are supported by other institutions. And that there's actually a societal conflict that has to be fought, and not with weapons, of course, but that has to be it's the way this is going to be changed is by a struggle that involves many people getting active, getting out of their comfort zones, and not just working full-time or donating, but sustain themselves with, for example, small jobs, and are active in their free time, which is challenging, and many people drop out, but we can work on that other than by setting up more organizations that employ people.
So we're running out of time a little bit. So I see many more people raising their hands. So we're a little bit lucky because lunch break is coming up. So we're not forced to stop right now. I would suggest I would take 2 more people. I have seen 2 people raise their hands. I will let them still say what they want to say, and then everybody on the panel can still give a final word, and then we stop. I know there's many more questions in the room, but of course we are getting close to lunch, so you can all discuss the whole lunch break long. So 2 more contributions from the audience, and then some more responses from the panel, and then I think we have to stop.
Thank you first, you four. I just have a question towards this money donation. There's any ethical border? For example, if you receive donation from a company that are paying specifically to you. For example, I know that we had trouble last year, but if a company or a person that's from a company give you a lot of money, that you can decide whatever you want to do with this money efficiently, and saving a lot of chickens or other animals that you choose, but this company wants you to advertisement something that's not vegan. You actually gonna choose if it's ethical or not, because it's a lot of money that you can use after for vegan advertisement, but you're gonna need to, accept doing advertisement for something that's not vegan. It's just vegetarian with 60% egg, for example.
So is your question something totally different? Yeah, okay, so is there a response to that right away?
Yeah, so I guess it's reasonable for different organizations to have different policies on such issues. And for instance, in the case of advertising vegetarian versus vegan vegan meals, we would of course be mindful of the fact that, for instance, if this vegetarian option includes a lot of egg, there could be actually more animal suffering involved than with a vegan option, and so on. So we would of course carefully analyze the idea, and yeah, then depending on the kind of organization you are, depending on your target audiences, and depending what you achieve. Yeah, there are different criteria according to which such hard decisions would be made, I guess. But I think it's, for many organizations, it won't make much sense to be like overly puritanical in a sense. So if we can end more suffering by making compromises, I think we often should do it. But I can't really like give a precise answer, because it would depend a lot on the circumstances. No, I believe that the ethical choice is to accept that we sometimes have to make compromises we intuitively maybe dislike in order to achieve our ethical goals. Yeah. Okay, so one last question or contribution.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting panel, and thank you for all of your comments that have really encouraged me to think about this issue even more deeply. I think, a lot of the conversation that I hear is about, top-down versus bottom-up approaches to social change, and that makes sense. When I first learned about effective altruism a few years ago, it was a question that I had as well. And I think, a couple of things are important to recognize. It is not either or. The animal rights movement has been such a grassroots movement forever, basically, that whenever we bring any conversations that seem, so-called top-down or that are top-down, it can seem like there's this focus on, top-down versus bottom-up. But it's really just the introduction of a different method for empowering the movement. And, in the United States, the movement is largely supported by philanthropists. So people like me are able to do the work that we can do. And I have a very strong intersectional focus, and I am very committed to empowering the grassroots. And I do absolutely believe that the grassroots is essential to social transformation and to the success of the animal rights movement. I could never do what I do to help empower activists and support the grassroots if not for the philanthropists in the United States who are helping me to do what I do. And I think we can absolutely shift social consciousness from within the system. For example, countless, this is anecdotal, but I have had, I don't know how many people come to me and say, now, I'm talking about veganism, but I'm also talking about shifting consciousness about our contribution to all issues that are oppressive. And many, many people will say, I never thought about things this way. I can see the connection between, animal rights. I can see the connection between changing my, so-called diet and changing my consciousness and how I think about political structures in general. So I think it's really important to recognize that we need, in order to empower the grassroots, we need to give people who are doing this work the tools to be supporting the grassroots. And not everybody is going to be an activist. A lot of people are just not going to get active and be participatory citizens in the way we wish they would. But by creating more jobs for people who do want to be activists like myself and like others, we increase the chances that more people will get involved in smaller organizations and in the movement.
Okay, so I think since we are over time, so everybody on the panel, you still have the chance to now give some final comments, some final statements.
Two tiny comments. Yeah. The one regarding getting donations. What I didn't want to say is we're getting far too much donations and I keep burning the money because I don't like it. No, the question when we talk about small is beautiful, what we do is we are aware that there's sort of campaigns like empowering grassroots. This is not something that gets you donations generally. So you could either invest in something that you can use as promoting your organization so that you will draw in more donations, or you do something that you consider effective that actually loses you donations. And this is the smallest beautiful debate. And we often tend towards doing activity that actually loses us money or donations or membership because of our confrontational style. If you're confrontational, then you generally get smaller. Big organizations can't afford it. But I've tried here to bring up differences, and my colleagues on the panel have closed the gap consistently, and it's good if there aren't actually any, and it's fine by me. It's just one last try for a difference. And this is a practical situation in VGT often. There are people, volunteers or activists who come who say, I have this little group and I want to do a demo, can you support us a bit? And then there's discussion. Should we be a professional NGO that with a professional appeal so that we hand them banners that are really neat and tidy, and we hand them a table and whatever the leaflets, and they are all according to our corporate identity style? Or do we just say, here is some money, create yourself? Then they won't stick to corporate identity. They might do things that we disagree with in a corporate style, or there might be something disadvantageous for the image of the group, whatever. But there is a point in letting people do what they feel is best, and this is furthering their creativity. What I would say, this is empowering grassroots, that they are supported in doing what they feel is the best way of doing it. And eventually, when it comes down to it, variety and a large spectrum of different approaches is what is needed for a mass movement and the revolution.
First of all, I want to give two concrete examples as an answer to Heiko's question. Now, what's actually new about effective altruism? So I believe that first, an organization such as Animal Charity Evaluators that does effectiveness research in such depth that this is new, and there wasn't such an organization before. And second, well, I gave this example of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and it's maybe illustrative, but it's just an anecdote, and to advocate for earning to give more systematically is also a concrete novel contribution of the EA movement, I believe. And more generally, considering the ethics of career choice as its own field within applied ethics is a novel contribution of effective altruism. And I actually believe that in hindsight, this is quite of a glaring omission, that people in applied ethics haven't thought systematically about this before. This connects to a point Friederike made. So I really have I'm all in favor of convincing people to reflect about ethics, to think about how they should change society and so on. But then don't we have a common interest that those people can and do use all of their time for these activities, and for them not having to do this in their personal time only and having to spend a lot of their time in some day job just to sustain themselves financially. So the matter of fact is that one's personal career is where the most hours of one's lives will go into. So it seems to be that the most important question is to ask, how can we use this majority of our time for social change and not just be active in our personal time? Because, I mean, it's not like effective altruists advocate that they want to set up a lot of professional organizations where people just think about ethics and social change in their office hours and then stop doing that in their personal time. Quite far from that. It's just that we really can be full-time activists in a certain sense, and we want to enable many more people to become full-time activists rather than part-time activists. And then to have a conversation about what to most effectively do in the time we can use for our activism. This is a different matter, and we should do this as well, but I really think we have this common goal of enabling as many people in the movement to being able to contribute as much of their time as possible. This seems to be, really seems to be a common goal of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting because of course, it's very understandable, and I think so myself, that it would be nice to be able to spend all my time on activism, for example. I think many people think the same here, and that for that we need funding. But I also think that there are certain dangers in, like some of these which Martin mentioned, that that kind of professionalizing, I'm all in favor of professionalizing grassroots in terms of skill sharing and exchanging ideas and evaluating and stuff. But there's a certain danger of like professional organizations that live on money given by donators, to look after keeping the money coming in, and kind of fearing, for example, to do actions that may cost them donators. And in regard to effectiveness, I'm actually a bit doubtful, because if you take small grassroots groups that do confrontational activities or block things or do things that in certain cases are very, very effective, I think. So there, for example, in Germany, there, just to have an example, there are several organizations who try to stop new animal farms from being built. One is Tierfabrikenwiderstand in Berlin, and they contributed, for example, to stop a 350,000 broiler farm, which has 8 rounds a year, so it's 2 million chickens per year that are safe now. And they live on almost no money, like, for their activism, because they're doing it in their free time. So if you are able to actually encourage more people to get active, you don't need hardly any money. You have just many people who are willing to commit to that, and of course, you have to think about how to sustain it. But I think it can even be more effective in terms of money and result.
It's an attempt to give an answer to like what is new about effective altruism or effectiveness, and maybe it's not the orthodox effective altruism answer, but what I see is that there's a big difference between well, the focus on being good people and being virtuous and doing the right thing, and on the other hand on having good results. So it's a consequentialist versus a deontological issue, basically. And in our movement we have our individual vegans often very much rightly so, give a lot of importance to being virtuous and good people. And I think effective altruism finds that effectiveness finds that very important, but wants to also emphasize, well, the results and to be pragmatic sometimes. And the woman here in front asked, like, oh, so you think you use money to, what did you say, money above ethics? And I think this is a thing that many of us think when we see like people attaching a lot of importance to results at the cost of maybe some values or virtues or whatever. And I think this is a question of does the end justify the means? And well, one of my favorite quotes is like, the question, does the end justify the means, is meaningless. The only question that is meaningful is, does this end justify these means? And that's a quote by Saul Alinsky from a book called Rules for Radicals, which I think shows that it can be really radical to be pragmatic.